Welcome back to Buying Sandlot. On today's episode, we have Advanced NIL's founder, Courtney Altimus. Advanced NIL is an NIL education, athlete protection, and development platform focused on helping athletes and the organizations around them navigate name, image, and likeness through educational curriculum. Advanced NIL has worked with over 50,000 athletes and families across high school, college, and pro sports through structured programming and digital education tools. In this episode, we talk about their NIL Academy platform, which they call NIL PreCheck, navigating the complex landscape and educating elite athletes at IMG Academy to avoid scams and red flags. Advanced NIL is standardizing education for the NIL era. But before we get into the episode, we have 2 weeks until the Buying Sandlot Summit in Philadelphia on April 14th and 15th, and tickets are still available. Get your tickets at buyingsandlot.com or use the link in this show's description. We'll have executives from Huddle, Game Changer, Perfect Game, Team Snap, all speaking, and panels around text-heavy hitters, streaming, facilities, and consolidation. Not to mention networking, all in the state-of-the-art Switch House and Ballers. Check the agenda out at buyingsandlot.com. We also want to thank Event Connect and our other sponsors who help power the show and allow us to continue to show up in your inboxes and podcast feeds. Now, let's get in the interview with Courtney. Courtney Altimus, founder, managing partner, Advanced NIL. Thank you for joining Buying Sandlot.
So psyched to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Can you give us some background on Advanced NIL and talk more about how your partnerships with places like IMG, which I was just down at, I took a great NIL class. You guys were featured down there. Can you just talk about that and how you're helping student athlete and parents prepare for this NIL landscape?
Sure. So Advanced NIL was formed actually well before name, image, and likeness came along back in 2017, and I can get there in a second. But basically where we are today is the education that we first started in 2017 has evolved and expanded so much because of college athletes being allowed to make money in 2021. And then now I think it's up to 46 high school states and DC allowing high school athletes to make money. And IMG being the leader in the space of sports and academic prep came to us after seeing all the work that we've done across 60 collegiate campuses, and then obviously our work with the pros, to ask if we could lead the efforts in educating their student athletes and their parents about what to expect with NIL. And they were really ahead of everybody else. We were working with some state associations, but not to the extent that IMG wanted us to really dig in, help their student athletes prepare, help parents prepare. And obviously, as it has evolved, even with IMG, given the caliber of athlete that is usually there, helping them prepare during the recruiting process, because that has changed because of now the revenue share that is allowed in college athletics. So everything from who am I building my personal brand to what does name, image, and likeness actually mean, to what do you do with the money when it comes in, and oh, by the way, how are you getting paid and how are they paying you, to help with contract review, anything and everything. And I always say we're here because of NIL, but everything we talk about is, it's about life. It's life skills.
And could you just talk about like the curriculum you guys offer? I know there's a freemium model of the NIL Academy. I know you also do subscription models as well. I'm sure there's an enterprise model for different clients and stuff. Can you just talk more about that curriculum?
Sure. So it's based on process-based learning. So helping athletes use processes they are already using as athletes, preparing for competition, reps, getting them to start practicing healthy financial reps, healthy life skills reps. So our curriculum is based on that. And what we've done is brought our expertise in our various fields together with curriculum design experts. And so, yes, we have some freemium modules that are available that are really helpful because people think they know about NIL because of what they read, and it's not even scratching the surface, and a lot of it is maybe not correct information. So we really try to, the freemiums are not an advertisement for Advance. They are value add, really help people start to get the context and understand what it is. And then we have other in all of the areas that we teach. So the curriculum is everything about protecting possibilities. So we have courses on personal branding. We have courses on decision making, which sounds kind of obvious, but athletes don't understand that they need to slow their decision making down away from their sport. Due diligence, big issue. Everybody talks about it. We've got to protect our athletes. And so what we do is really help them learn a process for due diligence, for that risk assessment process. Contracts. My partner, Luke Fedlam, is a non-agent sports attorney, meaning he does not get paid when the deals get done. He gets paid by the hour to make sure the athlete is protected in the contract. So we give basic contract education, and we're able to, throughout the entire curriculum, give not only basic fundamental information, but also real-time education on what's going on, because we're immersed in it every day. So Luke seeing all the contracts, we're advising athletes on their money, not a financial advisor, helping them think about money, their personal brands, how to make decisions, etc. So freemium, everything's available online, digitally. We do a lot in person, and we've built an entire due diligence platform that is free for athletes, agents, advisors, anybody who wants to work with athletes. They pay to become members of the platform.
Courtney, I'm just curious, before I was a buying Sandlot, I was a Big Ten beat writer. I remember being at Big Ten Media Days 2021, right when NIL kind of took effect, July of that year. Every single thing every coach, AD said at that event, reporter, proved to be totally wrong. None of it played out the way people thought it would. It seems like it changes every day. So if you could just speak to the difficulties of, you're immersed in it, but it's so many moving pieces, just having a handle on everything that changes.
Yeah. Everything does change every single day. And I think, going back to that 2021, those media days, a lot of what was being said was, this will be like every other change we've ever been through. We'll manage it. History repeats itself. It's not going to be as big as everybody's making it out to be. Having worked on Wall Street for 25 years and worked with pro athletes for decades, I knew that nobody knew what they didn't know. So, part of what we do is, number one, like I said, we're immersed in it. So we see on college campuses, we are not just talking to athletes, but on college campuses at IMG, we hold staff sessions. IMG has us as their main resource for staff to reach out to when they have questions so they can help their student athletes. So part of it is because we're completely unbiased, we're not selling investment products, we're not trying to, come in and educate and then try to get to the athletes for something else. We're totally unbiased, we're experts, we see everything. We become a resource for staff. So there's the headlines and everything that's changing every day, which we obviously need to keep up with. But more importantly, there's the element of how does that impact everybody who's working with student athletes and the athletes every single day. And so a lot of that is our connections, our relationships. We gather data every time we're on a campus. So we know what athletes are thinking. We know what parents are thinking. We know what coaches are thinking. And in terms of the actual changes, we're in the good position of not having to actually implement changes on college campuses. So I feel for everybody at the college level and especially the high school level where it's brand new. But we do have to make sure that we can help every stakeholder. So really important to stay connected to what's going on in the legal world, what the sports lawyers are saying about it, what's true, what's not true. And you get a feel as you go along for what's really going to become a big issue and what's really noise.
Yeah, you led me right into my next question, so I appreciate that. We're seeing, what are you saying currently in legislation? Mississippi lawmakers, this one example, they're trying to make NIL tax exempt right now, so players keep more money. But if you were put yourself in like a shoes of like a, say, a highly touted recruit was listening to this podcast, or a parent of a highly touted recruit, which is more likely, is listening to this podcast, what should they be paying attention to? What would you be telling them to be paying attention to right now in terms of like the legislations and the laws that are maybe coming into play?
So if I was talking to a parent of a highly touted recruit, or even just a parent who's, looking for their son or daughter to play college sports, focusing on the school choice and speaking to the folks on campus, that's still the most important thing. Okay, because the legislation is going to do what it does and it's going to filter down. But for parents of elite athletes who are getting offers from schools for revenue share, direct payment from the school, one thing many of them don't know is that that's truly an NIL deal. Okay, it is revenue share because the school's paying directly, but in those contracts, the school is sublicensing that student athlete's NIL. So more important than anything, parents should be focusing on what these contracts say. When it comes to legislation around state tax law, yes, that is important because it could mean that your son or daughter doesn't have to pay tax to the state where they go to school. At the end of the day, is that amount, whatever it might be, going to drive decisions being made for your son or daughter's academic and athletic future? I don't know. It's clearly, for the states that are trying to put it into legislation, it's clearly a recruiting tactic. So need to call each of these rules and proposed rules what they are. Because for schools, everything's about recruiting and retention. And if in between they do not win, the coaches, the admins, they lose their jobs. So understandably, it's about recruiting and retention. As far as any other laws or proposed legislation, it's going to be a while before we see something significant come through, certainly at the federal level. I think they should be paying attention to some of the lawsuits that athletes have filed, some of the lawsuits the schools have filed against athletes for liquidated damages clauses. Again, back to understanding that contract. So we think we know because we read all this stuff, but for parents, it's so critical to, again, separate noise. And the noise of proposed legislation is important so that you can anticipate, but it's important to sort of also stay in the moment and understand what you can control for your son or daughter now. And there's a very different, even in the elite category, there are those athletes who are currently making money for their name, image, and likeness in high school or not. And then what happens to those deals as you move into the next level, et cetera.
Yeah, like I mentioned at the beginning, I was down at IMG, that's how I learned about advanced NIL, took an NIL class, learned a pretty good amount in the first 30 minutes. I didn't know that Florida had different NIL laws than New York, than Pennsylvania, than all this stuff. But when I was down there, and we see this a little bit about when we talk with those elite sports academies, is like you said, those college revenue sharing and those donor collectives, I'll put that in quotes, they seem to be where the big money is for high school recruits. And when we talk to these sports academies, the money for NIL in high school is mostly peanuts. I would say less than 1% of elite recruits in high school are making significant, generating meaningful NIL income, making life-changing money. That doesn't really happen until they get on campus. I know a lot of times, like the O-line will go down to like the Rib Shack down the street because they'll be able to eat for free instead of saying, hey, we're going to give $500 to the entire O-line because you just got legality, you got contracts, you got accountants, you got state tax laws that know no general manager at a restaurant wants to deal with and stuff. So basically, what I want to know is, like, do you see that changing uh, in terms of the amount of NIL happening in these elite with these elite high school recruits, as we see these academies start to become the norm a little bit? Major brands, instead of dipping their toes into youth sports, now it becomes a part of their marketing strategy. And then you got to think, kids with the invention of social media, they're building brands younger and younger and younger, it feels like, with every generation. So do you see that meaningful NIL money in the high school level? Do you see that changing and increasing down the line?
Sure. It's going to largely follow what has happened in college. When you look at, 500,000 student athletes across the NCAA versus 8.5 million student athletes across the United States, it's so vast and so hard to predict. But what I will tell you is the sentiment is the same. In the beginning with college, the sentiment was, well, it's not really going to impact us because we don't have the household names. Our D3 field hockey players aren't going to be dealing with NIL. Wrong. The truth of the matter with NIL is you never know when the next deal is going to come. And you see companies, funds like Unrivaled Sports, which is funded by Harris and Blitzer, billionaires intentionally investing heavily in youth sports. And they're not investing really, they have some high school portfolio companies, but the portfolio companies they're focused on are the summer camps and the experience camps for the younger athletes. So when money pours into sectors, money follows. So there will be more money going to the non-elite athletes who have a story and who are putting their story out there. Somebody like Flage, she was on TV rapping at 10. Had NIL been available then, her trajectory might have been moved up a little. It would be the same. She's amazing, both on the court and off the court, but she may have made more money sooner. So when you look at 8.5 million athletes, will the vast majority of that number continue to just sort of continue to play sports and pay to have those experiences and not participate in name, image, and likeness? Probably. But we're going to start to see those influencers who maybe just, practice players. They may not even be getting in the games, but they're incredible musicians. And they make a story out of themselves being a basketball player and a musician or an artist. Or look at Jared McCain. He is, he's going to make money from Sally Hansen for the rest of his life because he paints his nails. They're interested in the story.
Courtney, do you find that the athletes and maybe non-football, basketball, maybe they don't realize how much money they can make, or the greater, world? Because I'm live in New Jersey. Wrestling is huge here. An All-American wrestler at Rutgers or Princeton could drive around the state for weeks on end in the summer and have a clinic from 9 to 12 at a high school, and 100 kids are going to show up and pay $50. And then he's going to that sort of thing. Whereas I think the quarterback of the Rutgers football team probably would have a harder time making that money, because why would a business go to him when they can go to a Yankee, a Jet, a Met, a Devil, whatever?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And we have courses on camps and clinics. One of our biggest messages to high school student athletes is this isn't all about social media. So if you just real quick think about it, 99% of our student athletes, college and high school, when you ask them what image means, they usually get name right. You ask them what image means, they'll say reputation, how you're viewed in the community. It's not. It's your photo or a video of you. So if you think about Michael Jordan, a picture of him playing, a GIF or a meme or anything, that's image. When you ask them what likeness is, 99% of them say likability on social media, following. when in fact it's a graphic representation of you. Michael Jordan again, that Jumpman logo. Can't see his number, can't see his face. We all know it's Michael Jordan. My point to them is, if you don't know the meaning, the most basic of basic, you don't know what you're selling and you don't know what you're protecting. So, and also it's not just social media. That's immediately where their heads go. So we do a lot of educating on what are other ways you can engage in name, image, and likeness, and camps and clinics is huge. And I tell elite athletes all the time, I'm telling you, parents will pay for their younger child to learn their sport from you because it's you.
Switching over, and I know you guys deal with this. We talked with Adam Gutierrez from Huddle. They were doing a financial partnership between Huddle and Chase. And he mentioned to us that there are roughly 25 NIL scams a week. How prevalent do you see those? How prevalent is that number? How's Advance helping with that from an education piece? And then if you could just offer some examples, of types of scams you guys are seeing that are attacking these kids.
Yeah, I don't know about the 25 a week. It could be probably not less, but it could be more. That doesn't surprise me at all. Our due diligence course really targets that. And so there's a lot to it, but one of the biggest things we tell student athletes and parents is, if anybody is rushing you to do anything, it's a massive red flag. There is no opportunity, no one single opportunity right now, especially in high school, that is more important or going to provide more for you for the rest of your life than school and sport. So somebody who's trying to rush you to sign either a deal where you can make money or to hire them as an agent. I mean, the agent piece is such a massive, massive problem that nobody's even realizing right now. But if they're rushing you, it's a huge red flag. So if nothing else, that's the most important thing. The types of scams that we're seeing could be anything from agents charging exorbitant amounts of money, locking in athletes in perpetuity. And what I say to athletes is, so this person gets you some deals today, if they get you some deals, and say you go on and you're not the 1% or less than 1% who plays pro in your sport, but you discover a cure for cancer. At age 35, you're still paying that agent for your name, image, and likeness when everybody's celebrating you for being a researcher or a doctor. That's the reality of what's happening here. I tell everybody to look up the Zion Williamson case. He was able to have that case thrown out on a technicality, and he absolutely would have owed over $100 million to that agent who had signed him in perpetuity. That was obviously in college, but that can now happen in high school. I can't emphasize due diligence enough. The scams are coming from, like I said, agents. Some of the deals, athletes don't realize they can make a contract in their DMs. They get promised something and they start, if you've never done an ad or an endorsement before and you think, well, this is no big deal, they're going to send me some stuff, I'm just going to post. And they start posting and the company's getting free advertising and they never send anything. That's like a bad mistake, but you can move on and lesson learned. But if you think about that type of predator being out there and what can happen and what is happening, it's vast. And think about this, for high school student athletes, 99.9% of them are minors. Anybody who comes in contact with them from a school, as a coach, any organized activity around them, they have to pass background checks and clear sex offender registry screens. None of these people who are coming at the athletes do. They don't have to pass anything. They can call themselves agent. They can call themselves CEO. They the athletes in high school are absolutely sitting ducks. And yes, parents are around them. Yes, staff, coaches, teachers are around them. But because of social media, everybody has access to them. So it's why we built our due diligence platform.
And you also have the NIL vetted directory, I believe, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I'm referring to. Yes, we call it NIL PreCheck. Because if you think about TSA PreCheck,
I like that.
You pay some money, and TSA says, okay, you've passed these screens. We think the likelihood of you doing something bad is pretty low. Doesn't mean you're not going to do something bad, but this is cool. You don't have to take your shoes off and go through quicker. That's what we're saying to agents and advisors. Why do you want to compete with convicted felons or sex offenders who are trying to tap into the same 16-year-old that you are? Do NIL PreCheck.
Courtney, is there like a dollar figure that you would kind of tell a high school athlete, a family, like this isn't worth the risk if it's not at this threshold for a deal?
It's different for everybody. What I tell families is that's how they have to think about it. What's the impact? Same idea of thinking of the no state tax. What's the actual upside impact here? And does my potential downside match that potential upside? So the risk reward piece is what it's all about. And the dollar figure is going to be different for every family. But once they decide what that threshold is, if something looks good and it is at that threshold or higher to engage in, they absolutely need to get the contract reviewed.
Just a couple more from me. In terms of, Advanced NIL's business model, what do you think the greatest revenue upside is long term? You have a lot of pro clients, you have a lot of college clients, than you might, have for high school clients currently. But do you see that shifting to the younger demo to get in front of them earlier? And as I mentioned before, especially as we see a lot of these elite academies sprout up, which I feel like every day there's a new one coming into the fold.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been focusing on high school and younger since the minute that NIL was approved in college, because we know it just continues to follow. We're working on a really exciting project right now with a company called Athlete Biz. We are providing all of the education in and around the topics, the spaces that we provide education for. Jason Belzer, who's been in the industry his whole career, is building this platform, and it's really targeted to the full 8.5 million athlete market. It's what those ages appreciate and love. It's going to be gamified, focused on education first, and it's going to be for all of them. So maybe a 14-year-old starts working on this platform and they may never even engage in NIL or play a college sport, but they're learning and they're engaging in an app that's like every other app they use, but it's actually for good. So the scalability piece has to come from something like that. And I am all for getting, because I know our education, I know the quality of it, getting it to the masses. And I'm not a tech person, so I'm not about to build an Athlete Biz platform. But I'm really excited for the launch of that. I'm sure we'll see some other attempts that'll be good. But I love that people are now finally waking up and saying, oh my God, there's 8.5 million high school student athletes. What can we do?
Yeah. No vibe coding in your future. I understand.
Right.
Me neither. Me neither. Last one from me. NIL. We talk a lot about it, and when we talk about it, it's more for students who are in the domestic U.S. But NIL for international students, I think is so interesting, and I learned about this down at IMG. Can you kind of go into it a little bit more? I've heard they have even stricter rules of brands they can partner with, and everywhere they're allowed to physically film NIL deals and stuff. And I think a lot of people think that international players can't get NIL. I just know they have to set kind of different parameters?
Yeah. So from a pure legal standpoint, because of their visas, the type of visa that they're here in the US to go to school, and that visa rule says they cannot make money in the United States. And when you think about that rule, okay, it makes sense whenever it was made, however many years ago, a gazillion years ago. If somebody's going to come here to get educated, we don't want them taking the place of a United States citizen who could have an opportunity at that job that they're thinking about. Makes sense. Ironically, since we're talking about name, image, and likeness, by definition, nobody can take that job because you can't be somebody else. However, because it's actually earning income in the United States, it's not allowed. It remains not allowed. Plenty of international student athletes are making money, but that's the bottom line. And if you talk to any immigration attorney and you ask what the definition of this visa is, they will tell you the same thing. What we've seen is opinions that say, okay, well, if you're getting revenue share in college, it's really might be considered passive income, which really isn't the same thing. So you can make money there, which has kind of become industry standard. The problem is for the international athletes is you don't want to be the one who's standing with no seat when the music stops, because from a technical perspective, it's black and white wrong. Everybody's doing it. The safer place for athletes to make money is when they're outside the US. They don't have to be in their home country, but you see more and more teams going to tournaments outside the US. Could be Canada, could be Croatia. That is when they are truly allowed to post as much as they want, host as many camps as they want, make all the money they want. That's really how the F1 visa, the student visa, works. We're seeing a lot of different interpretations. And since I'm not a lawyer, I can't offer an opinion on them. I just know, having been at Lehman Brothers when they filed the largest bankruptcy in United States history, and we were AA rated on a Friday and bankrupt on Monday, you don't see the music, that stoppage coming. When it happens, it happens. And so I just always, and IMG knows this, since they know I always emphasize extreme caution and absolutely working with an immigration attorney that is removed from the school.
What I find interesting too is the whole idea of like a foreign student taking a job away. It sort of might be happening in a weird way, because like if I was a college basketball coach at a resource challenge program, I'm going to spend a lot of time in the Baltics trying to find guys who can play, who can't take. To piggyback off that, you said something that really fascinates me, that revenue share is NIL. Because I feel a lot of times when we hear reporting, I always wonder, are these schools fudging the numbers? They say, like, we have an $8 million NIL budget. My guess is families probably think that's $8 million in addition to the revenue share, but it sounds like that might actually just be the revenue share.
So the $20.5 million cap on revenue share is a cap. And as every other rule in college sports, as soon as it was made, as one of my favorite football coaches likes to say, new rule, we find the loophole and drive a semi right through it.
Yes.
To have an edge in recruiting, you got to figure out a way around the cap, which the cap is ironic in and of itself, because the House settlement was the largest antitrust settlement in U.S. history, and antitrust means you can't limit, but we've put more limits on them. So more lawsuits to come on that. But to your question, every single payment to an athlete in high school or college must be an NIL payment. There must be quid pro quo. They must do something to actually get that money. So revenue share, that's why I say revenue share it's truly bringing revenues and paying athletes with it. But those athletes must do something for that money because of this whole issue around employment. You can't just get paid for playing, because then that means you're an employee and they're not employees yet. So the parents, and I always say this to them, they need to ask a lot of questions to understand when they're being told numbers. What exactly does that mean for my son or daughter? What does he or she have to do for that money? Where's the contract? And don't pay attention to what's in the headlines. I mean, pay attention to it because you need to know what's being said and ask the right questions from that. But in terms of taking it at face value, nobody knows how much is actually getting to these athletes. And schools that need to differentiate themselves, which is everybody, because they need to have a leg up to win, are going to figure out a way to do it. Cap, no cap. The most important thing they have to do right now is make sure it's a legitimate NIL deal. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Two
Yeah.
more for me. One, you mentioned, kids who have a story to tell. Do you think we will get to a point where a university might say, let's say this guy is on the soccer team and he's a bench player, but he's got 500,000 followers on TikTok and he's an influencer. We need to carve aside some of our budget to get this kid on the team so he just makes TikToks on the bus.
We might. I think we'll see less of the university interest in paying for that, and more the athletes realizing they can make a lot of money just from being on the bus or the bench, and they're going to absolutely leverage that. There could be situations where if we start seeing an influencer who's a practice player or the team manager from, I think it was McNeese last year.
State, yeah.
Yeah. If that starts attracting more quality players, then yeah, they'll be trying to recruit kids like that. I just think that it's not going to become a regular practice.
Yeah. And last one for me, now that this is a lot of it's routing through the schools, I know that we have no transparency really about any of this. The public schools are actively trying to create laws and ways to not have open records and everything. I ask this question of everyone we talk to in this space. What happens when the Supreme Court rules 5-4 that this is violating Title IX, giving all of the money to the football and men's basketball team? How do you, do you think that, how are these schools going to pay $40 million in back pay or whatever it's going to be to female athletes? But two, do you think that's just something that might be the thing that finally breaks the system?
I think Title IX is a tough one because, again, and this is another reason NIL is key here, they can make the argument right now that it's not a Title IX violation because it's the payments are commensurate with the value being brought in by the individual's name, image, and likeness, which is true. Football, men's basketball, women's basketball, across the board, bringing in more revenue dollars. And so I think there will be some monumental Title IX case. I don't necessarily know that it will be what breaks everything wide open because there's such a political logjam around the student as employee issue. If they were employees, no question, massive violation of Title IX. I think what's more likely to break open and change NIL vastly will be when there is collective bargaining. And I say when because it's going to happen. It may not be for 5 years from now, and maybe the NCAA gets a safe harbor from antitrust and is able to call them employees, but still limit their compensation. that's the big fear of anybody who's benefiting from the billions of dollars made in college sports right now. The big fear is we're going to have to give up more. And I mean, think about it. If you own a pro team, your labor costs are set around 50%, tiny bit more in some cases. Right now, if you're able to invest in a college team, your labor costs are max 20%, max, and really more like 10. So anybody who's benefiting from money in college, high school sports to a lesser extent right now isn't going to want that bargaining to start, because that immediately eats away at your margin. But we will get there because they want a safe harbor from antitrust for a reason. They're breaking antitrust rules. And it's all been done under the name of amateurism. So going to be fascinating. But as I always say, this is what happens when there's billions of dollars being made. It's fascinating. And I personally think, from all the research I've done, if the NCAA 20, 25 years ago, whenever the TV contracts became so massive, that's when their argument stopped working. Had they decided to start compensating players in some minimal way and had a progression, we wouldn't be in this complete disaster Wild West that we're in today. I was on a podcast last week and they asked me 3 words to describe what the last almost 5 years have been. And I said, chaotic, exciting, and dangerous. And it remains each of those.
Well, thank you, Courtney. This was awesome. Learned a lot about NIL, not just on the youth sports level, but a lot on the college level, and how it will how it will affect the youth sports athletes going down the line and everything. So we appreciate it. I have a lot of people in our audience that are going to be interested in this. Anything that you want to promote, anywhere that people can contact you, Advance NIL, in case they want to get, kind of a lay of the land of what's going on and everything with the classes?
For sure. All of our socials are Advance NIL, and send some DMs. You can go to our website, advancenil.com. There's a way to get in touch with us there. And then the due diligence platform, which is free. Again, it's the third parties, the agents, advisors who have to pay for that. That is ANSBC.com, or I'm sorry, at NSBC.com, NIL PreCheck. And I encourage everybody to go there and look and see if you're working with somebody, are they in that database? And if they're not, ask them to get certified. And if they come back and tell you they don't want to pay a nominal fee to represent to you that they in fact are not a criminal or a sex offender, it's information for you.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. It's a really interesting conversation.
Thanks for having me, guys.